CSR is now a familiar term in business, but if you ask your parents or grandparents, you'd discover that it wasn't known in their days. Why was the idea of CSR developed? What changed in the environment to make it necessary? Globalization having its outcome in the growth of world trade 6% per year in last 20 years, faster than GDP, and liberalization of many economies in 1980s, with Thatcherism and Reaganomics as leading examples, was a process which diminished the meaning of national legislation, and trade unions lost much of their power. At the same time, the liberalization of capital and labor movement generated many opportunities for the creation of multinational corporations, locating their activity where the capital was protected well and labor less well, which of course motivated many countries to further liberalization of labor markets in order to lower labor costs. Such a situation led to many problems, ethical issues, and loss of trust on the part of consumers. Companies, due to the unveiling of many scandals, were forced to introduce some changes to gain trust. One such tool is CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility, which allows a company to show the consumer its responsibility towards society and environment. CSR can be perceived as a tool which shows to what extent the company respects the values of society. The major idea behind corporate responsibility is that a company is responsible for its action not only towards shareholders but stakeholders too. The company should be interested and willing to help society and the environment and not only to achieve a profit. It is debatable to what extent companies are responsible for observed image to ecological and social systems, economics as externalities, and what should be the nature of the reaction, obligatory or voluntary. Who should control it? The control of these mechanisms is left to the consumer, who can exert his or her consumer sovereignty on the market. Consumers, through their purchase decisions, may pay some form of premium for CSR affiliated products or brands or reputations. As a consequence, firms involved in CSR would gain competitive advantage. This in turn would force non-CSR firms to migrate to similar positions. In consequence, without the interference of the government using the market tools, companies will become more ethical. But is it so? Let's provide some actual examples. Is Tönnies, a German meat concern, only responsible for its profit or for their employees, as well as for employees coming from sub-companies where 90% of the employees work? The apparent working conditions and lack of protection of employees caused the outburst of corona cases in Gütersloh and eventually led to a further lockdown with consequences for all the inhabitants of Gütersloh, who had to suffer the closure of schools and nurseries, as well as limitations in transport. Can a company obtain its profit at the cost of the society? Tönnies employed in its sub-companies people coming from Eastern Bloc countries like Bulgaria, Romania, and Poland, who, in contrast to native employees, were forced by poor economic situations to which they had no alternative to take such a job. Such a policy was violating social justice values, creating two categories of workers. Similar examples can be found in the US. In many agricultural companies, the workers come from South America and Mexico and suffer under conditions far worse than white Americans whose legal position is protected. A similar situation occurs in Italian agricultural camps, where immigrant workers are employed who don't have enough resources to protect themselves from unfair working conditions. Many such workers don't have health insurance, thus bearing the cost of such seasonal work. Unfortunately, it is often society, volunteer organizations, and families, whereas the company remains keeping the profit. One has to bear in mind that the company could obtain this profit thanks to the efforts of this society, who provided these workers and the environment in which the company was able to open its activity. Is the price which the company pays for these workers and taxes enough? Does this cover the cost that the society pays for education, health of workers, and the environment?